back to today's video. Today is Sunday, July 26th, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Senate no toss-ups map from RCP. So they've released this overall new map that gives us a general idea of where the Senate elections might end up. They give us the overall party composition based off pure polling data, meaning there's no input from forecasters. Essentially, they're taking whoever's leading in the polls right now and taking out all of the states that they classify as toss-ups, because obviously they do that, and then characterize the races appropriately. So if the election was held today based off the data compiled on RealClearPolitics, the Democrats would have 52 seats and the Republicans would have 48. This is down from not an exact flip, but a little bit of a flip, where the Democrats were at 47 seats and the Republicans were at 53, and they currently are entering into the November general election. So in order for this to happen, the Democrats would have to have a net gain of 5 seats, and it looks like they're getting it in some states that are swing states such as Arizona, Colorado, North Carolina, and Iowa, and then 2 states that are typically safe for whichever political party, Montana for the Republicans and Maine for the Democrats. So Maine's a pickup. If you're wondering what's interesting about Maine, it's because Susan Collins has been in this race since the 90s. So she's been running and had very consistent re-election bids. She won her last re-election bid by 37% in 2014. So for her to be in a competitive race is very important. And Sarah Gideon actually might come out on top at the end of the day in Maine. And Maine is also typically a Democratic state, so expect Joe Biden's numbers to help Sarah Gideon on that level. As we look over in states such as Montana, Steve Bullock is the incumbent governor. There's no other data except for one poll that shows him ahead by 2%, so I really want to see more data come out of Montana. I know there are some pollsters that are expected to release data in the near future, but Steve Daines won his first election back in 2014 by 17.9%. If we go back to 2008, I believe the Democrats had a hold here, yeah. So they retired, and then this seat was up for grabs for the Republican Party, and they ended up winning it in a Republican wave year. So the only pickup for the GOP is from Alabama, and that really makes sense. Tommy Tuberville is the now official nominee for the Alabama Senate race, and he leads Doug Jones by 8% in the only poll out, but out of a lot of the data that we've seen would only indicate that Alabama would move further to the right. Tommy Tuberville is starting to expand his lead over Senator Doug Jones, and we likely could see the end of a Democrat in Alabama. Despite him winning for the first time in 25 years back in 2017, that streak might continue, considering that there probably won't be another opportunity for the Democrats to pick up a Senate race there. So with a net gain of 5, let's go ahead and take a look 4 years ago as to where this stood. 4 years ago, or at least 3 years ago and a couple of months, the Democratic Party was supposed to gain 3 seats on the national level, but not enough to take the majority. The Republicans had 51 Senate seats, and interestingly enough, this is the 2022 Senate map. So you can see why I consider it to be favorable for the Democrats. The reason why also is because this map was incorrect. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were 2 states that the Republican Party retained in 2016 on top of Donald Trump's victory on the presidential level. So these seats definitely will be close in 2022, along with possibly Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Arizona. So actually Arizona might have Mark Kelley as the incumbent, but still the races will be overall competitive. And if we're looking at this map, the Democratic Party wasn't too far off from what they were expected to gain back in 2016. The only states that were wrong were Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, which were wrong on the presidential level as well, and New Hampshire, which was expected to go to Kelley Ayotte. I believe she was the incumbent Republican at the time, ended up going to Maggie Hassan, who is now the incumbent, and now there's 2 incumbent Democrats from New Hampshire in the United States Senate. So that actually ended up with a 48 to 52 majority, obviously in favor of the GOP. The GOP, I don't believe, picked up a single seat, so they just retained all of the seats, but the Democratic Party typically actually does better in a presidential election year, whether it's the House elections or the Senate elections. They gained 6 House seats in 2016, 2 Senate seats, so they likely could very well gain seats, especially with a presidential win on top of it. So if we're looking at these races, this actually, looking at the map that we have, some of these Republican states do end up staying safe for the GOP, or not safe, but in the GOP column. States such as Kansas or Texas or, Georgia and Georgia special election and Alaska, these states are expected to go to the GOP. But for the Democratic Party, they end up losing in Alabama, but that's obviously previously a Democratic state. But according to the data, they have solid leads in Colorado, in Arizona, in Montana, in Iowa, in North Carolina, and Maine. That's enough to put them over the top without Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie. Just kidding. Joe Biden has not officially announced who his VP is going to be, but it all depends. So if we're looking at the Senate map, let's go ahead and take a look at these states in particular. So Arizona, I know I just covered Montana and Maine, but let's look at Arizona. So the interesting thing about Arizona is that it typically overestimates Republican support, whether that's on the presidential level or that's on the Senate level. The Republican Party is expected to do a little bit better. So John McCain was definitely a specific candidate who did very well in the Senate race back in 2016. This is actually his seat up for grabs. He's the only Republican. I don't even think Doug Ducey outperformed his RCP average. So typically in this entire region, actually, Nevada included, Texas included, Colorado included, the Republican Party seems to be overperforming based off of a lot of the statistical data that we have. Looking at the polls from 2016, Hillary Clinton was expected to lose Nevada, be within 3% in Colorado, come closer in New Mexico, lose Arizona by a larger margin. So a lot of the data then indicated that this entire region was supposed to air. Texas was further to the right. So John McCain's the only one who really has broken through that. It's not too difficult, but I will say that Mark Kelley now leading by 7.8%, even though Joe Biden leads in Arizona by 4%. So he's outperforming him by roughly 4%. That's a very good margin, because if Joe Biden narrows up Arizona and it's +1 on election day for even Trump, Mark Kelley still wins the election. And Martha McSally is just very unpopular in this state. You can't really run someone who just lost an election 2 years prior for the 2020 race, especially with Arizona possibly turning blue on the presidential level. In Colorado, John Hickenlooper is the former governor running for Senate now against Cory Gardner. Cory Gardner only narrowly won back in 2014, despite it being a Republican wave year. He won against an incumbent, so it makes sense, but it looks like he has no realistic shot past this point. John Hickenlooper is absolutely going to carry this Senate race, and I don't see a possibility of Cory Gardner winning that election. Looking at North Carolina, Cal Cunningham leads Tom Tillis by 4.2%. Actually, in the state of North Carolina, back in 2014, Kay Hagan was the incumbent. And, I believe that's Sean Hogg, but Tom Tillis ended up getting a 1.7% win through a plurality. So he didn't actually have too much of a substantial victory. It was North Carolina with a Democrat incumbent, but it's also a Republican wave year. Arkansas is the perfect example of a Democrat who was easily defeated, despite being, obviously, the incumbent. So in North Carolina, we likely could see Cal Cunningham defeat Tom Tillis. Now, the only thing that the Republicans should be hopeful for is the fact that a lot of the support here, it seems as if there's a lot of undecided voters. Cal Cunningham is winning at 44% of the vote, but Tom Tillis only has 40% of the vote. That leaves a very significant portion, 16% of the electorate, that is currently undecided. And a lot of undecideds in states such as North Carolina and some other southern states typically break for the GOP, despite it being a toss-up state on the presidential level. So the Republican Party might have a realistic shot, but it looks like Cal Cunningham, obviously they have a realistic shot, but it looks like Cal Cunningham is currently in the lead. So let's look at Iowa. Teresa Greenfield is the Democratic nominee. Joni Ernst is the Republican nominee. She was first elected back in 2014 by a margin of around 9%. Teresa Greenfield now leads her by an overall average of 1%. The interesting thing about this race is that Donald Trump carried this state by roughly 10% back in 2016, or nearly 10%, which means he should be extremely competitive in this race, if not leading. But it looks like he's pretty close in this race. If we're looking at the presidential numbers, Donald Trump only leads by 1.5%, and according to FiveThirtyEight, by 0.3%. So it's an even worse margin at that point. But Teresa Greenfield seems to be outperforming Joe Biden on the Senate level, obviously comparing it to his presidential numbers. So Teresa Greenfield could very well win this Senate race, but Joe Biden lose the state of Iowa on the presidential level. Joni Ernst isn't necessarily too unpopular, but I will say she does embody a lot of the former GOP that Donald Trump has pretty much erased from the Republican Party's identity. A lot of those Romney and McCain-esque type Republicans don't have as much of a voice as you might think. Donald Trump type politicians have been winning primaries and been representing the GOP, whether it was 2018 or upcoming in 2020. Donald Trump Republicans seem to be dominating the Republican Party at this point. And Joni Ernst, while, yes, full support of President Trump, she may not get the full support of his voters. A lot of them, not a lot of them, but some of them may end up voting for Trump on the presidential level, but possibly either not vote on the Senate level, leave it blank, which hurts the GOP, or even vote for Teresa Greenfield or somebody else. So looking at this map, I believe I covered every single state that was expected to flip, but let's talk about Alabama for just a moment. I know I talked about Tommy Tuberville expanding his lead. I think that the Democratic Party should completely pull out efforts in Alabama. I understand Doug Jones may be a good senator in the eyes of many Democrats, but I will say that that race is probably going to be a waste of money. I realistically don't see a shot for the Democratic Party in Alabama. It's very comparable to Colorado for the Republican Party. Both of these states, their opposite parties should pull away. Or at least incumbent parties should pull away all efforts of winning there or trying to win there, because it's probably not going to happen. Looking at other states, we have Texas, which is up. There's not too much interesting data in Texas and Kansas. They haven't released any data because we don't know who the nominees are going to be until August 4th. That's actually in just 2 weeks. So I'm pretty excited to see those results. Looking over in states such as Mississippi, Mike Espy is supposed to have a mildly competitive race with Cindy Hyde-Smith, but not enough to break the Senate majority. In South Carolina, same thing. Looking in Georgia with John Ossoff, same exact thing. Supposed to be a close race there. Kentucky, Amy McGrath doesn't exactly do too well against Mitch McConnell, but still expected to be a competitive race. Let's go ahead and see. Texas, I don't think has, a 10-point margin for John Cornyn. That's less than 15%, but still obviously a solid GOP hold. Gary Peters, roughly a 10-point margin as well. So the Democrats seem to be locked down in a lot of these states that they're retaining. Same thing for the GOP, but it is possible for the Democrats. I guess they're gaining 6 seats, but a net gain of 5, which overall would completely rewrite the Senate majority in favor of the Democratic Party, 52 to 48. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. I'm actually going to start using the Twitter a little bit more often so I can interact with you guys there. On your screen, there should be a video that you can go ahead and watch if you want, and then a playlist for my 2020 Senate election videos. You can go ahead and scroll through them if you want. Again, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all later today.